r/AskReddit. Serious, ex-cult members. What was your oh shit, I'm in a cult moment? When I told my parents that I wanted to cut my hair for the first time at 16 and they made me sign a contract claiming all responsibility for any disease or other misfortune that God would rain upon me for it. I'm sure an all-powerful God cares about paperwork. When the leader wanted to split up all the marriages and take the wives for himself, and when he wanted to give the husbands of those wives different women to be with. Basically sharing the women, except nobody had a say in who they were to be with. Many people were deeply unhappy and pained by this, but they had to submit to the Holy Spirit, as they would say, and do what they were told. I was a teen at the time my family and I left this cult, so thankfully I was not pawned off on some random guy. What cult was this? A relatively small, unknown one in Alberta, Canada. They mainly refer to themselves as the group. When I was in my early 20s, I was dating a guy who was being indoctrinated into a cult, and so I went along for the ride for a while. I would join them for meals and hang out. They seemed really cool and interesting people, and I'm open-minded and was new to town. The first time I got suspicious was when the guy I was dating told me how he had been on a retreat with the mysterious leader, and how it had rained on everyone else but the rain had partied around the leader. Oh cool. Then I got invited to this special women's only weekend. The group was acting like it was such an honor for me to be invited because I wasn't officially part of the community, but it was because I was so great. Everyone in the group would be given these tasks from the leader that they needed to do to move forward in their development. Like my boyfriend was a friendly, outgoing guy, so he had to spend several hours a day alone to learn to be at peace with himself. Everyone would act like it was such an honor when they would get these tasks. During the women's weekend, one of the other young women started talking about how the leader had told her that her family's uptightness about sex was holding her back, and so that she needed to sleep with any man in the group who asked her. She was trying to talk about how freeing it was to her, but she seemed so sad. And several women were acting like sleeping with the leader was a spiritual event. OMFG, I got out of there so fast and never looked back. Years later my sister joined a cult, and it was so eerie to hear her spouting the exact same shit that I had heard from the community. Like there's a becoming a cult leader for dummies or something. I swear it's like most cults are just an elaborate gag for sex. Everything is about sex. Except sex. Sex is about power. When I was stationed on Okinawa, the late 90s, I went to this church that seemed to be the pretty generic Christian church, but they met in a small room above a store. Didn't think much about it until they got a new pastor. They owned a house in town and always invited everyone over for some cookouts and Bible study. The new pastor was actively encouraging the enlisted service members to move into the house and get the housing allowance to support the house. Then he wanted to see RLA, think pay stubs, to ensure we were supporting the church enough. I think the final straw was when they started taking attendance for their 7 days. Yep, you were expected to attend some church thing 7 days a week, of services, and trying to shame anyone that didn't make it to something. I didn't tell them I wasn't going anymore, just stopped showing up. They knew where my barracks room was and sent soul savers to get me back to the church. The last time they talked to me, they again went with the same route, that no other church would get me into heaven, and I told them I think they proved I made the right decision. How'd they have access to their base? Other service members? Yes. They had other military members who were in their church drive them on base. When the second guy took over, their soul saving became way over the top. They would go to all the barracks and knock on every single door to recruit new members. When I told them I didn't think that was allowed, so wouldn't do it, the pastor said I had to decide whether the military cared about me or the church. I think abandoning their church was the best. And I know they weren't the only church doing things like this across multiple bases. I was born into Scientology. Even though I internally questioned a lot when I was younger, I had learned very early on not to actually question anything. My aha moment was when I was ready to go on to the next step, and one of the other members, who not so surprisingly is also an ex-member now, asked me why I was planning on doing what I was doing, and my answer was it's what's expected of me. I went home and really thought about what I wanted and realized I didn't actually agree with most things in Scientology. I started to process to leave shortly after. I had to leave the right way since my dad and sister are still very involved and I don't want to lose them from my life. Edit. So I wrote this comment and went to bed thinking I would get a few votes but not so many questions. So I'll answer the what is the right way one here and as many individuals as I can over the course of the day. Sorry to leave you guys hanging. Now, this all happened 15 years ago, so I'll do the best I can, but there is some info I just don't remember or remember incorrectly. So leaving the right way depends on where you are within Scientology. There is public, who goes in, donate, take courses, go to events, but are under no contractual obligation. Class V org staff, the place most public go to get their services done, and those on staff work there. It's more like glorified volunteerism. You are typically under either a 2.5-year or a 5-year contract and you're expected to work at least 40 hours a week. When I was a senior in HS and told them I couldn't work all those hours and it was insane the amount of pressure I had put on me to drop out of HS to go work for them full time. And by the full time I mean MF 910, Saturn Sun 96, and there would be events for the public on a lot of Saturday nights that would go until past 11. I did not drop out of school, but it was a point of contention the entire time I was there. The Sea Org. This is the highest level of commitment within Scientology, and within it, there are more levels, but I don't know much about it since I was never in. I do know that you have to sign a billion-year contract. You get housed and fed on their dime, but the rooms are essentially closets with a bed and a dresser. No real personal space, and would sometimes make about $50 a week. For working 80+ hours a week. You didn't really get time off. If you were there you were expected to be available for anything since you really had no other obligations. So how I left. As I stated above, I was on staff at a Class V org, and when you do that you don't pay for any services you get. So I had finished one of my services and was talking about what the next one I was going to do was when one of the other staff members asked me why I was choosing the one I did. And essentially I had already started down one of several different paths, so my answer was basically it's what's expected of me. When I said that, he told me to go home and think about what I had said. I did think about it, and over the next few weeks started opening my eyes to things that were happening that I didn't agree with. I realized that I really wasn't happy and that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I decided I was done and was going to break my staff contract. I don't remember who I told, but they started the ball rolling right away. You need to have a leaving staff sec check, basically a super intense, very expensive exit interview, that takes days or even weeks to complete. Once that is complete, you're supposed to essentially make amends with anyone you feel you have wronged by leaving. Then, to get back in good standing, you have to pay your freeloader debt. So many of those services I told you were free while you were on staff. Well, now that you're off of staff you have to pay back the org for them. And it can be thousands of dollars. My dad paid for my sec check because I said I wasn't spending any money on them and he wanted me to be in good standing. I had some money saved up from when my mum had passed away and used that to pay off my freeloader debt. Trust me, I wish I hadn't done that. But then after that, I essentially make sure to not say anything bad about Scientology around members I know are active. As far as my dad is concerned, I still think highly of SCN, but that it just isn't for me. I think my sister knows better, but we just don't talk about it. I've been out for just about 15 years at this point, and I still get mail, I still get phone calls. It is still awkward when I see Scientologists I used to be close with, but I am much happier now. I love the life that I have made for myself. Most of the stories you hear of people escaping and needing to hide etc. are from the Sea Org. I really don't have experience with that to know how difficult it must have been for those people. I will say that I have watched most of the Leah Remini show and most of the stories do not seem made up or exaggerated to me. I can see how a lot of them would have really happened, and it's extremely unfortunate that others don't see the abuses happening right under their nose. I was in a cult that was run by a family member. It was a small group, and we were to give 100% loyalty to this family member, financial, and everything. It escalated to be my whole life for a good 5 years and I didn't know what normal relationships were. I met a guy and he showed me what love actually is. He told me that this relationship I had with this family member wasn't loving and I immediately knew. Told him everything and was out since then. It was so hard to say I think I might be in a cult but I did. Blacklisted family member and other members and haven't looked back. South Korean cult. I attended but thankfully didn't join in the end. I had just moved to Korea at 18 and didn't really know anyone. I was just starting to learn Korean, conversational, but still low level, and didn't really have a lot of friends yet. Someone invited me to go to church with them, and they were really nice and I wanted to meet people. I had a lot of fun at this church. The people would take me out to eat, help me with Korean, and even help me with my homework, test prep. It was 100% the nicest church I've ever visited, and I felt like I had a place to fit in now. This is how they suck people in. Also, there was a female pastor who was super hot and would sometimes let people, always younger men, stay with her if they needed a place. I always wondered if this was an intentional tactic to try to lure more young men in because this specific church, one location of many, seemed to only go after men. Eventually, they started pressuring me to make myself unhealthy, saying that there was a balance between physical and spiritual strength. I love bodybuilding, some being physically strong was an issue. They were pressuring me to lose muscle and tried to make myself sick if possible, to make my body as weak as possible. They said if I didn't my soul would grow restless and crawl out of my mouth when I was asleep. I repeatedly said I wasn't interested but wanted to continue attending this church. This was not acceptable at all. They strongly pressured me to start making myself sick. I stopped going to the church and they waited outside of my school for me and followed me around for what seems like a couple of months. They knew my class schedule and were always outside trying to talk to me. Eventually, in the end, they backed off and I never heard from them again. Another guy from the church also got creeped out and left and we're still good friends to this day.